The sticker was neon orange. Not a subtle sunset orange or a pleasing apricot. It was radioactive hazard orange, the kind of color designed by evolution to tell predators, "Do not eat this, or you will die screaming." It was slapped squarely onto the yellow plastic roof of my son's little tyke's cozy coop. I stood there in the driveway, coffee mug in hand, blinking against the harsh glare of the morning sun. The cozy coop, a vehicle capable of a top speed of 0.5 miles per hour, provided my 3-year-old had eaten his Wheaties, was currently parked roughly 4 feet from the garage door. It had been there for exactly 45 minutes while I ran inside to change a diaper. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered, stepping off the porch. I peeled the edge of the sticker. It didn't peel. It shredded. It was that industrial-grade adhesive they use to keep tiles on the space shuttle. I scraped at it with a fingernail, achieving nothing but a flake of orange under my nail bed. "It's considered an obstruction, Jack." I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. The voice had the tonal quality of a bandsaw cutting through wet styrofoam. I turned slowly. There, standing on the sidewalk, was Karen Ann. And yes, her name was actually Karen Ann. She was the president of the Shady Creek Homeowners Association, a woman who treated the neighborhood covenants not as guidelines, but as religious texts handed down by a vengeful god. She was wearing her combat uniform, beige capris, a polo shirt tucked in with military precision, and a sun visor that was pulled down low, like she was piloting a fighter jet. She was holding a measuring tape. "Morning, Karen Ann," I said, trying to keep the venom out of my voice and failing. "You stickered my toddler's toy." "It's not a toy when it's left in a common visual zone," she said, snapping the measuring tape back into its casing with a violent thwack. "It is classified as debris. Section 4, Paragraph 2 of the bylaws clearly states that driveways are strictly for the storage of motorized or registered towable vehicles, no personal items, storage units, or debris." I looked at the plastic car. It had eyes painted on the front. It was smiling at me. "It's a car, Karen Ann. It says coupe right on the side." "Does it have an engine?" she asked. "It has foot power," I countered. "Very eco-friendly." She didn't smile. Karen Ann had never smiled in her life. Rumor had it her face muscles had atrophied from lack of joy. "Is it registered with the Department of Motor Vehicles?" "It's for a 3-year-old, I said, my voice rising. "He doesn't have a license yet. He failed the parallel parking portion of the exam." "Then it's debris," she said, making a check mark on her clipboard. "You're being fined $250 for the violation, plus an administrative fee for the sticker application." "You're charging me for the sticker you used to vandalize my kid's toy?" "It's a notification fee," she corrected. "Please move the item immediately, or we will call the junk removal service to have it impounded." She turned on her heel and marched toward the next house, presumably to measure the length of someone's grass with a micrometer. I stood there, the heat radiating off the asphalt, staring at the neon orange sticker on the plastic roof. $250. For a toy car. I looked at the bylaws she had referenced. Driveways are strictly for the storage of motorized or registered towable vehicles. My blood didn't boil. That implies a chaotic, bubbling reaction. My blood went cold. It crystallized into a lattice of pure, malicious focus. "Vehicles only," I whispered to the plastic car. "Okay, Karen Ann. You want vehicles? I'll give you a vehicle." 3 hours later, the cozy coupe was safely hidden in the garage, scrubbing the shame of the orange sticker from its plastic pores. I, however, was sitting at my workbench, 3 fingers of rye whiskey in a glass, illuminated by the harsh fluorescent buzz of the shop light. I wasn't drunk. I was inspired. Spread out before me was the Shady Creek HOA Handbook, a document roughly the thickness of the Old Testament and twice as judgmental. I had a yellow highlighter in one hand and a red pen in the other. I was hunting for a loophole. I read the definition again. Vehicle. A machine that is used to carry people or goods from one place to another. Permitted driveway parking. Any passenger vehicle, motorcycle, or enclosed utility trailer that is street legal, registered with the state, and in operable condition. Street legal, I muttered. Registered. Enclosed. I took a sip of whiskey. The burning sensation in my throat matched the burning desire in my soul to ruin Karen Ann's visual landscape. I opened my laptop. My first thought was a hearse, a 1980s Cadillac hearse, parked ominously facing her living room window. But no, that was too cliché, and frankly, a bit creepy for my own family. My second thought was a tank. I actually Googled decommissioned Soviet tank for sale. Surprisingly affordable, but the shipping from Ukraine was a nightmare, and I was pretty sure the damage to pavement clause in the bylaws would actually stick. I needed something that wasn't just ugly. Ugly was easy. I needed something confusing. Something that walked the razor-thin line between artistic statement and eyesore. Something that followed the letter of the law so perfectly that it would make Karen Ann's brain short-circuit. I browsed government auction sites. I browsed police impound lots. And then, on a specialty architectural salvage site, I saw it. Lot number 4092, 1924, K2, cast iron telephone kiosk. The Jubilee. Original British Telecom red. Condition, fair. Weight, 1,600 pounds. Location, salvage yard, Mechanicsburg, PA. I stared at the screen. It was magnificent. It was bright, screaming, fire engine red. Itswa was a towering rectangle of British imperialism. It was a box designed for people to stand in and shout. It's a box, I said to myself. It's storage. But if I just put it in the driveway, it's a structure. It's a shed. It's a violation. I took another sip of whiskey and leaned back, closing my eyes. I visualized the phone booth. I visualized Karen Ann measuring it. I visualized her saying, "That is not a vehicle." And then, the epiphany hit me like a bolt of lightning striking a radio tower. If I put the phone booth on wheels, it's a cart. If I put the phone booth on a chassis with a VIN number, brake lights, and a license plate, it's a trailer. Specifically, an enclosed utility trailer. I grabbed the red pen and started scribbling on a notepad. Step 1. Buy the booth. Step 2. Buy a heavy-duty trailer chassis. Step 3. Weld the booth to the chassis. Step 4. Register it as a home-built recreational transport unit. Step 5. Park it. I frantically checked the dimensions. The K2 booth was 3 feet square at the base and 9 feet tall. It was essentially a vertical coffin made of iron and glass. If I mounted it on a trailer, it would stand nearly 10 feet tall in my driveway. It would block out the sun. It would cast a long red shadow over Karen Ann's prize-winning hydrangeas. I checked the bylaws again. No height restrictions on non-commercial vehicles. I laughed. It was a dry, jagged sound that bounced off the concrete walls of the garage. I clicked, "Buy it now." The price was hefty, $1,200. But can you really put a price on vengeance? Can you put a price on the look of sheer confusion on the face of your enemy? No. This was an investment in my mental health. I printed the receipt. I taped it to the wall next to the orange violation sticker I had scraped off the cozy coupe. "Honey?" my wife called from the kitchen door. She cracked it open, peering into the garage. "Why are you laughing like a supervillain?" "I bought a phone booth," I said. "A phone booth?" She didn't even blink. She's been married to me for 10 years. She knows the drill. "Is this about Karen Ann?" "It's entirely about Karen Ann." "Is it going to get us sued?" "Technically?" I smiled. "No. Technically, I am just expanding our fleet of vehicles." She sighed, a sound of long-suffering acceptance. "Just make sure it doesn't leak oil on the pavers." "It won't leak oil," I promised. "But it might leak justice." I turned back to the computer. Now I needed a contractor. I needed someone who didn't ask questions. Someone who could look at a diagram of a phone booth welded to a boat trailer and say, "Yeah, I can make that highway legal." I knew exactly who to call. Welder Dave operated out of a corrugated steel hangar at the edge of the industrial district, a place where the air tasted like rust and ozone. Dave was a man composed entirely of denim, grease, and scar tissue. I'm not sure if he actually spoke English or just a series of grunts that my brain translated into technical specifications. I pulled up to his shop the next morning. The yard was littered with the skeletons of projects past. Half a dumpster welded to a bicycle, a spiral staircase that led nowhere, and what looked disturbingly like a homemade submarine. Dave was under a truck, sparks showering down on his chest. He wasn't wearing a shirt, just a leather apron. "Dave!" I shouted over the sound of a grinder. He slid out on a creeper, flipped up his welding mask, and squinted at me. He had a cigarette unlit in the corner of his mouth. "Jack, break something?" "I need to build something, Dave. Something stupid." Dave's eyes lit up. Stupid was his specialty. He stood up, wiping his hands on a rag that was dirtier than his hands. "How stupid?" I laid the plans out on his workbench, pushing aside a pile of rusty sprockets. "I have purchased a 1924 British phone booth, cast iron, 1,600 pounds. I need to mount it on a single-axle trailer chassis." Dave stared at the drawing. He took the cigarette out of his mouth, tapped it on the table, and put it back in. "Why? To spite my HOA." Dave nodded solemnly. This was a cause he understood. "So you want a vertical trailer, high center of gravity, wind resistance of a brick wall." "Exactly. But it needs to be street legal. It needs a VIN. It needs to be registerable as a custom enclosed transport." Dave scratched his beard, which made a sound like sandpaper on wood. 1,600 pounds. You're gonna need a 3,500-pound axle. Leaf springs. We'll need to fabricate a custom drop floor so it doesn't tip over when you take a corner faster than 10 miles an hour. "I don't plan on taking it anywhere, Dave. It just needs to be able to go somewhere." "Doesn't matter," Dave grunted. "If my name is on the welds, it's gonna be roadworthy. We'll box the frame. 2x3 square tubing. I've got an old boat trailer VIN plate from a project that went south in '08. We can recycle the registration." "Perfect. You want lights on it?" "It needs brake lights and turn signals to be legal, right?" "Yeah," Dave said, tracing the outline of the booth on the paper. "Tell you what, we drill into the cast iron. Pain in the ass, by the way, gonna cost you extra for bits. And we flush mount LEDs. We wire the turn signals into the crown of the booth. When you hit the brakes, the whole top lights up red." "Dave, you're an artist." "I know. What about the interior? Interior? It's a vehicle, Dave said, grabbing a piece of scrap metal and starting to sketch. You need a seatbelt, maybe a cup holder. If we put a solar vent fan on the roof and a 12-volt outlet, we can classify it as a recreational vehicle. Lowers your insurance premiums. I stared at him. You can turn a phone booth into an RV? Jack, I once turned a septic tank into a smoker. I can do anything. He started listing parts. I'll need a week. You go get the booth. Bring it here. Don't kill yourself moving it. Cast iron is brittle. You drop that thing, it shatters like glass. I rented a heavy-duty flatbed. Good. Get heavy straps. The ratcheting kind. Not that bungee cord crap you use for your groceries. Dave spit on the floor and shook my hand. His grip was crushing. This is going to be beautiful. We'll paint the chassis black to match the base. It'll look factory. Like British Telecom intended to tow these things behind horses. I don't think they did that, Dave. They should have, he said, pulling his mask back down. Get out of here. I got metal to melt. The drive to Pennsylvania was fueled by adrenaline and Red Bull. I was driving a rented Ford F-350 towing a 20-foot flatbed equipment hauler. I felt manly. I felt capable. I felt like a trucker, provided truckers listened to audiobooks about naval history and stopped every 2 hours to pee. I arrived at the salvage yard in Mechanicsburg just after noon. The place was a graveyard of history. Piles of reclaimed bricks, clawfoot tubs, and ornate radiator covers stretched for acres. And there, standing in the center of a mud puddle, like a displaced monolith, was the K2. It was taller than I expected. It was redder than I expected. The seller, Old Man Jenkins, shuffled out of a shed. He looked like he had been constructed out of the spare parts of other old men. He wore suspenders and a hat that had lost its structural integrity during the Nixon administration. "You the fella for the box?" he wheezed. "That's me, Jack." "She's a beauty," Jenkins said, slapping the side of the booth. It made a dull, heavy thud. "Solid iron. They don't make 'em like this anymore. Main reason is the lead paint, and the weight, and the fact that nobody uses payphones. It's perfect," I said. "You know," Jenkins lowered his voice, leaning in, "some folks say this one is haunted." "Haunted?" "Aye, by Winston Churchill's second cousin, or maybe just a guy who really hated the operator. Sometimes when the wind blows through the vents, it sounds like someone sighing." "I'll take my chances," I said. Loading the thing was a comedy of errors. Jenkins had a forklift that looked like it predated the internal combustion engine. We wrapped chains around the booth, padding the iron with old carpet scraps. "Easy!" I yelled as the booth swung wildly in the air, dangling like a 2,000-pound pendulum of death. I got it, Jenkins yelled, slamming the gears. The forklift bucked. The phone booth dropped 6 inches, barely missing the trailer fender. "Careful! That's my vehicle body!" We finally wrestled it onto the flatbed. It stood upright, towering over the truck cab. It looked absolutely ridiculous, like I was kidnapping a piece of London. We spent the next hour strapping it down. I used 6 heavy-duty ratchet straps. I strapped it from the top, the middle, and the base. I cross-strapped it. I triangulated the tension. If the trailer flipped over, that phone booth was going to stay attached to the frame until the heat death of the universe. "That ain't going nowhere," Jenkins declared, kicking a tire. "What you gonna do with it anyway? Garden shed? Shower stall?" "I'm going to park it in my driveway to annoy a woman named Karen Ann." Jenkins paused. A slow, toothless smile spread across his face. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a rusted key. "Here, this locks the door. Give her hell, son." I shook his hand, climbed into the F-350, and looked in the rearview mirror. The red booth dominated the view. "Next stop," I said to the empty cab. Welder Dave's House of Pain. I was 50 miles from home, cruising down I-95, when I saw the lights. Blue and red, flashing in my mirrors. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The flaw in the plan. I was hauling a historical artifact strapped to a flatbed. Surely there was a law against this. Transporting a phone booth without a permit? Impersonating a British citizen? I pulled over to the shoulder, the heavy trailer lurching as I slowed down. The police cruiser pulled in behind me. I watched in the side mirror as the officer approached. He was wearing the full state trooper getup, campaign hat, sunglasses, jawline chiseled from granite, name tag, Miller. I rolled down the window. "Afternoon, officer." Officer Miller didn't say anything at first. He took off his sunglasses. He looked at me. Then he looked at the trailer. Then he looked back at me. "Sir," he said, his voice flat. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Was I speeding? No. You were doing exactly the speed limit, which is suspicious in itself. He gestured with his thumb over his shoulder. "I pulled you over because you have a telephone booth strapped to a trailer." "It's not just a telephone booth, officer," I said, trying to sound confident. "It's the body for a custom restoration project. I'm building a camper." Miller raised an eyebrow. "A camper? Out of a K2 kiosk?" "It's a tiny house movement thing," I lied. "Minimalist living. Vertical sleeping." Miller walked slowly toward the back of the trailer. I watched him circle the booth. He tugged on one of the straps. He thumped the cast iron. He peered through the little glass panes. I sweated. I sweated profusely. He walked back to the window. "Sir, are you a fan of Doctor Who?" I blinked. "Excuse me." "The show. Doctor Who." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Because if you paint this thing blue, you know you've got a TARDIS, right?" The tension drained out of me so fast I almost melted into the seat. "Oh, yes, well, it's the wrong model, technically. This is a K2. The TARDIS is a police box, which is wood, usually, but—" "Nerd," Miller said, but he was grinning. "My wife loves that show. She'd kill for something like this in the garden." "Actually, officer, I'm turning it into a street-legal trailer. Gonna put it on wheels." Miller laughed. "You're crazy. But hey, the straps are tight. The load is secure. That's all I care about." He put his sunglasses back on. "Just do me a favor?" "Anything. If you do paint it blue, send me a picture." "I'm keeping it red, sir. Historical accuracy." "Fair enough. Drive safe. Watch the height clearance on the underpasses. That thing looks like a giraffe." "Will do, officer." He walked back to his cruiser. I sat there for a moment, shaking my head. The universe was on my side. Even the state troopers respected the booth. I put the truck in gear and merged back onto the highway. I looked at the booth in the mirror. It stood tall against the wind, unyielding, defiant. "We made it, old girl," I whispered. "Next stop, legality." The next week was a blur of sparks, grinding metal, and the smell of burning ozone. I spent every evening at Welder Dave's shop. The transformation was nothing short of Frankensteinian. Dave had built a custom chassis, a heavy-duty steel rectangle with a 3,500-pound axle and chunky tires that looked like they belonged on a Jeep. We used a gantry crane to lower the phone booth onto the frame. It landed with a thunderous clang that shook the concrete floor. "Solid," Dave grunted, welding the cast-iron base to the steel frame. "That bond is stronger than my first marriage." Then came the vehicle specifics. I spent 3 hours wiring the electrical system. We drilled holes into the rear of the booth. Painful, as Dave predicted, and installed round DOT-approved LED brake lights. We put amber turn signals on the sides. For the pièce de résistance, I wired the license plate holder. It had a little light that shone down on the empty space where the plate would go. "It needs a horn," Dave said on Thursday. "A horn? Vehicle code. Needs an audible warning device." We found an old Ford Model T Auga horn at a swap meet and mounted it under the chassis, wired to a button inside the booth. Inside, we installed a single, fold-down jump seat taken from a transit bus. We bolted a seatbelt to the iron frame. Dave welded a cup holder to the wall, right next to the old coin slot. "It's ready," Dave said on Friday night. He slapped the fender. "It's technically a trailer, but if you sat in it while someone towed you, you'd probably survive." "I don't intend to be towed, Dave." "Good, because the aerodynamics are terrible." Now came the hard part. The DMV. I walked into the Department of Motor Vehicles on Saturday morning with a folder full of paperwork, receipts, and photos of the construction process. I pulled ticket number 42. I sat. I waited. I watched a man try to register a lawnmower as a go-kart. Finally, number 42 was called. I approached the counter. The clerk was a woman named Brenda. She had glasses on a chain and the demeanor of someone who had seen every form of human stupidity and was unimpressed by all of it. "Help you?" she asked. "Hi, Brenda. I need to register a home-built custom utility trailer." She sighed and pulled a form. "Weight? 1,950 pounds, curb weight. Length, including tongue, 6 feet. Width, 4 feet. She paused, typing. "Body type?" "Enclosed," I said. "Make and model?" "Custom. I call it the K2 Transporter." "Color?" "Red. Very red." She looked at the photos I had attached. Her eyes narrowed. She adjusted her glasses. She picked up the photo of the phone booth on wheels. "Sir," she said, "is this a telephone booth?" "It is a custom-fabricated metal enclosure, Brenda. Note the brake lights. Note the VIN plate welded to the tongue. It says telephone at the top. That's the model name, like a Charger or a Ram. This is a telephone." Brenda looked at me. I looked at Brenda. "Does it have wheels?" she asked. "2 of them, new tires." "Does it meet DOT lighting requirements?" "LEDs all around." "Do you have the receipts for the materials?" "Right here." She stared at the photo for another 10 seconds. I could see the gears turning. She could reject it. She could call a supervisor. She could make my life hell. But Brenda was tired. It was Saturday, and frankly, the paperwork was in order. "Utility trailer, enclosed," she typed, the keys clacking like gunfire. "Registration fee is $45. I almost cried. I handed her my credit card. 5 minutes later, I walked out holding a shiny new metal license plate. I had paid extra for the vanity customization. The plate read, "Call me." I held it up to the sun. It was the Holy Grail. It was the shield of invincibility. I went back to Dave's shop. We bolted the plate on. "It's official," I said, stepping back. The booth sat there, gleaming on its black chassis. The tires were shiny with armor all. The red paint had been buffed to a mirror finish. It was absurd. It was beautiful. It was a weapon. "Take it home," Dave said, wiping a tear, or maybe a piece of grit, from his eye. "Go make that lady cry." Sunday morning, 8 a.m., the witching hour for the HOA. I hooked the K2 Transporter to my SUV and drove it home. The drive was short, but glorious. People stared. Kids pointed. A dog barked at it. I backed into my driveway with the precision of a surgeon. I positioned the trailer so it was perfectly centered, occupying the prime real estate where the cozy coupe had once sat. I unhooked the SUV and drove it into the garage, leaving the phone booth trailer standing alone in the driveway. I got out. I chalked the wheels with bright yellow rubber blocks. Safety first. I grabbed a bucket of soapy water and a sponge. I started washing it. The neighbors began to emerge. First, it was Bill from across the street. He was retrieving his newspaper. He froze. He dropped the newspaper. "Jack?" he called out. "Morning, Bill," I shouted cheerfully, scrubbing the gold crown on the roof. "What is that?" "New wheels, Bill. 1924 model. Vintage import." Bill walked over, scratching his head. "It's a phone booth." "It's a trailer, Bill. Legally. See the plate?" Bill looked at the "Call Me" plate. He started to laugh. It started as a chuckle, then grew into a belly laugh. "Is this about Karen Ann?" "I can neither confirm nor deny, Bill." Then the curtains moved at the house next door. The enemy had been alerted. I scrubbed harder. I whistled. The front door of Karen Ann's house opened. She stepped out. She wasn't wearing her uniform yet. She was in a floral robe, clutching her coffee mug. But the clipboard was already in her hand. It must sleep with her. She stopped dead. Her jaw actually unhinged. She marched down her driveway and up mine. "Jack," she said. Her voice was trembling. "What is this monstrosity?" "Good morning, Karen Ann. Just giving the rig a wash. Road grime, you know." This is a structure," she sputtered. "You have erected a structure in your driveway. This is a violation of Section 7, outbuildings and sheds." "Structure?" I stopped scrubbing and looked shocked. "Karen Ann, please, don't insult her. This is a vehicle." "It is a phone booth," she shrieked. "It is a custom-enclosed utility trailer," I corrected, pulling the registration card from my pocket. I had laminated it. "Registered with the state. Plate number Call Me. Look, it has wheels. It has a tongue. It has brake lights." She stared at the registration card. She stared at the wheels. She stared at the booth. "It's distinctively unsightly," she yelled. "It's bright red." "So is a Ferrari, Karen Ann. Are you banning Ferraris now?" "It's not a car. You can't drive it." "It's a trailer. I tow it. Bylaws Section 4, Paragraph 2. Driveways are strictly for the storage of motorized or registered towable vehicles." "This is a registered towable vehicle." She was hyperventilating. "I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," I said, wringing out my sponge. "I'll be here, detailing the rims." She stormed back to her house. I turned to Bill, who was watching from the sidewalk with a bowl of popcorn he had apparently materialized out of nowhere. "She's gonna flip," Bill said happily. "I know," I said. "Isn't it beautiful?" I opened the door of the booth, sat on the fold-down seat, and waited for the sirens. 20 minutes later, a patrol car rolled slowly down the street. It wasn't Officer Miller this time. It was 2 local cops I didn't know. They pulled up to the curb. Karen Ann was already there, pointing at my driveway like she was identifying a murder suspect. "There!" she shouted. "Look at it! It's a hazard! It's an eyesore! It's an illegal structure!" The cops got out. One was tall and weary. The other was young and trying to look serious. They walked up the driveway. I was sitting inside the booth. I had brought a thermos of coffee and a newspaper. I slid the glass pane open. I had replaced one of the fixed panes with a slider for this exact moment. "Morning, officers," I said, through the window. "Can I help you?" The tall cop stared at me. I was a grown man sitting in a British phone booth in a suburban driveway. "Sir," the cop said, "we received a complaint about an illegal structure." "Not a structure, officer. It's a vehicle." I stepped out. I handed him the registration. I pointed to the VIN plate. "It's a trailer," I explained. "Street legal. Licensed. Insured. The cop looked at the registration. He looked at the plate. He walked around the back and looked at the lights. "Turn on the hazards, please," he said. I reached inside and flipped the switch I had installed. The top of the booth flashed amber. Blink, blink, blink. The young cop covered his mouth to hide a smile. The tall cop walked back to Karen Ann. "Ma'am, the vehicle is legally registered and parked on private property. There's no violation here." "Vehicle!" Karen Ann screamed. "It's a phone booth! He's mocking me!" "It's a trailer, ma'am. The state says it's a trailer. We can't tow a legally parked vehicle from a man's own driveway." "But look at it." "I see it, ma'am. It's red. It violates the aesthetic standards." "That's a civil matter, ma'am. HOA business, not police business. Unless he parks it on the sidewalk, we can't do anything." The cops walked back to their car. The tall one gave me a subtle nod. Karen Ann stood there, vibrating with rage. She looked like she was about to undergo nuclear fission. "This isn't over, Jack," she hissed. "I will bring this to the board. I will have the bylaws rewritten. You won't get away with this." "I'm just following the rules, Karen Ann," I said, polishing the door handle with my sleeve. "Just following the rules." For the next month, I had to maintain the illusion. If I just let it sit there, she might argue it was abandoned or storage. So I treated the phone booth like a high-performance vehicle. Every Tuesday evening, I went out with a tire pressure gauge. I checked the 2 tires on the trailer. I made a show of it. I frowned at the gauge, nodded, and added a puff of air. Every Saturday, I waxed it. Do you know how much surface area a phone booth has? A lot. I was out there for hours, buffing the cast iron until it shone like a ruby. When it rained, I sat inside it. This was my favorite part. I would go out with a book, close the door, and sit in the dry, cozy booth while the rain hammered against the glass. I waved at cars driving by. The pizza delivery guy started using me as a landmark. "Yeah, turn left at the guy in the phone booth." But Karen Ann was watching. I could see her blinds twitching. She was documenting. She was building a case. I needed to escalate. I needed to prove it was mechanical. I hired a mobile mechanic. "You want me to do what?" The mechanic, a guy named Steve, asked when he arrived. "I want you to perform a tune-up," I said, handing him $100. "It doesn't have an engine." "I know. Just check the lug nuts, grease the bearings, maybe tap the frame with a wrench a few times. Look thoughtful." Steve shrugged. Money is money. For 30 minutes, Steve lay under the trailer, clanging a wrench against the steel frame. I stood nearby, holding a clipboard, nodding seriously. "How's the suspension looking, Steve?" I asked loudly, glancing toward Karen Ann's house. Stiff?" Steve offered. Good, good. Keep her tight." Karen Ann came out. She marched to the edge of her lawn. "You are insane!" she yelled. "Regular maintenance is the key to vehicle longevity, Karen Ann," I shouted back. "It's a box! It's a box on wheels!" "Don't listen to her, old girl," I whispered to the booth. "She's just jealous of your curves." Steve crawled out. "You're a weird dude, Jack." "I'm a pioneer, Steve." But I knew the hammer was about to drop. The annual HOA meeting was coming up, and Karen Ann had been quiet for 3 days. That meant she was plotting. The summons arrived by certified mail. Notice of hearing. Regarding the unauthorized telecommunication structure, vehicle. Agenda Item 1. Amendment of bylaws to exclude novelty transport units. The meeting was held in the community center basement. The air smelled of stale coffee and floor wax. The room was packed. Usually, HOA meetings attract 3 people. Tonight, there were 50. The phone booth guy had become a local celebrity. I wore a suit. I brought a PowerPoint presentation. Karen Ann sat at the head table, flanked by the other board members. Ted, who slept through everything, and Linda, who was terrified of Karen Ann. Karen Ann opened the meeting. "We are here to address the issue at 402 Maple Drive," she began, her voice tight. "The homeowner has exploited a loophole to store a piece of industrial debris in his driveway. I propose we immediately amend the bylaws to define vehicle as motorized automobiles only." A murmur went through the crowd. "Objection!" I stood up. "Sit down, Jack," Karen Ann snapped. "I have the floor," I said, walking to the front. "If you ban non-motorized vehicles, Karen Ann, you are banning all boat trailers, you are banning all campers, you are banning Ted's jet skis." Ted woke up. "Wait, what about my jet skis?" "She wants to ban them, Ted," I said, "because they aren't cars." "Now wait a minute," Ted said, frowning. "Furthermore," I continued, clicking my remote. A slide appeared on the screen. It was a photo of the booth glowing under the moonlight. "This is not debris. This is a classic British K2. It is a piece of history. To ban it would be cultural discrimination against the British Empire." "It's a phone booth," Karen Ann yelled, slamming her gavel. "It belongs in a museum or a dump, not a driveway." "It is a registered vehicle," I shouted back. "And the neighbors love it." I turned to the crowd. "Who here likes the booth?" Hands went up. Lots of them. "My kid loves it. It helps me find the house when I'm drunk." "It's better than Karen's gnome collection," Karen Ann gasped. "My gnomes are tasteful." "The booth stays," someone chanted. "The booth stays." Another joined in. Karen Ann looked around the room. She was losing them. Her grip on power was slipping. "I moved to fine him," she screeched. $500 a day." "On what grounds?" Linda asked quietly. "He followed the rules, Karen. He registered it. It has a plate." "Because I hate it!" Karen Ann exploded. "I hate looking at it. It's red. It's mockery. He's mocking me." Silence fell over the room. "It's not about the rules, is it?" I asked softly. "It's about control." Karen Ann stood up, trembling. She looked at the board. She looked at the crowd. She threw her clipboard on the table. "Fine," she yelled. "Keep your stupid box. Keep your trailers. I quit. I resign. You people deserve each other." She stormed out of the basement. The door slammed shut. For a second, there was silence. Then Ted shrugged. "So, can I keep my jet skis?" The room erupted in applause. Karen Ann moved to Florida 3 months later. I like to think she found a retirement community where she could measure the length of palm fronds in peace. The booth stayed. It became a fixture of the neighborhood. At Halloween, I turned it into a TARDIS. Officer Miller came by and took a selfie. At Christmas, I wrapped it in lights and put a Santa hat on the domed roof. I was sitting in it one evening late in the fall. I had installed a small heater, so it was warm inside. I was sipping a scotch, watching the leaves blow across the driveway. The red paint was gleaming. The call me plate reflected the streetlights. My cell phone buzzed. It was my wife. "Dinner's ready," she said. "Are you still in the booth?" "Yeah," I said. "I'll be right in." I didn't hang up immediately. I looked at the old, disconnected rotary phone on the wall of the booth. I picked up the heavy black receiver and held it to my ear. There was no dial tone, just the silence of cast iron and history. "Hello?" I whispered into the dead phone. This is Jack. Yeah, we won. Over and out. I hung up the receiver with a satisfying click. I patted the dashboard I had built. Good girl, I said. I stepped out onto the driveway, locked the heavy teak door, and walked toward my house. They said my driveway was for vehicles only. They were right, and I had the best vehicle on the block.